Linnea is the new 5-star Geo Sub-DPS coming in version 6.5, and she might actually become one of the strongest supports in the game. In this guide, we'll cover her talents and rotations, best weapons, artifacts, teams, and constellations, and see how impactful she really is for Lunar Crystallize teams. Hello, welcome to Genshin Filter, your quick guide for everything Genshin. So let's get started! VARKA and Flins are here. And before you empty your wallets in the shop, let me share with you a site that will save you a lot of money. Top Up Live. This site lets you top up all the most popular games at much cheaper prices. By using my link, you can get up to 30% off compared to in-game prices. It's super simple. Just enter your UID and server and you're done. It's 100% safe using PCI security and delivers in just a few minutes. And for an even better deal, use my code FILTER for an additional 12% off. So hit my link in the description or pinned comment to get these great deals. And thank you Top Up Live for sponsoring this video. Linnea is a 5-star Geo Bow user who ascends with crit rate, and her main playstyle is as an off-field Geo Sub-DPS that focuses on dealing very high Lunar Crystallize damage that scales off defense, while also buffing and healing the team, making her another premium support for her dedicated Lunar reaction, similar to the case with Inefa and Lauma. Her normal and charge attacks are standard bow hits and irrelevant for her playstyle outside of her overworld passive that we'll go over in a moment. Her elemental skill is the main part of her kit. Linnea will summon Lumi to follow the active character and deal off-field AoE Geo damage for 25 seconds. Lumi has 3 power forms, Super, Ultimate and Standard, which allows Linnea to be played in 2 different playstyles. In the first playstyle, when you tap her skill, Lumi will be summoned in the Super power form, dealing 2 hits of AoE Geo damage around every 2 seconds, and if there are moon drifts on the field, created from triggering the Lunar Crystallize reaction, then Lumi will also deal 1 hit of AoE Lunar Crystallize damage around every 6 seconds, which is where the majority of Linnea's damage comes from. Regarding her second playstyle, by continuously tapping the skill, Linnea will keep feeding Lumi with gems to make him grow and grow until it goes into the ultimate power form, where Lumi does 1 big nuke of AoE Lunar Crystallize damage. While feeding Lumi, Linnea will have increased interruption resistance, and after the nuke, Lumi will change to the standard power form, where Lumi only deals the 2 hits of AoE Geo damage, but around every 5 seconds, and it won't do the Lunar Crystallize damage even if there are moon drifts on the field, so it is only useful for some slow off-field Geo application, but not for damage. The first playstyle, using the super power form, will be the one you'd usually want to use in most cases, but both playstyles are very similar in how much damage they dish out overall, and can be useful in different scenarios, which we will go over when covering her rotations. Her elemental burst does team-wide healing on cast, and then continuously heals the active character for 12 seconds and costs 60 energy. When casting the burst, it will also summon Lumi in the superpower form, and if it was already on the field, it will reset Lumi's duration and will keep its form. Her Ascension 1 passive will decrease the Geo resistance of enemies by 15% when Lumi is on the field. When the team is in the Ascendant Gleam Resonance, this Geo resistance will decrease by an additional 15%, for a total of 30% Geo resistance shred to enemies, which is a great buff. Her Ascension 4 passive gives an elemental mastery buff based on 5% of Linnea's defense, which would reach 100 EM buff when having 2000 defense on her. If the active character is a moon sign character like Zibai and the Not Cry characters, they will get the EM buff. And if they are not a moon sign character, Linnea will give the buff to herself, which is actually a cool design that works great when playing Linnea with older Geo carries who don't care about EM. She also has the passive to enable and buff the Lunar Crystallize reaction like Zibai and Columbina, and like Zibai, Linnea's buff also scales off her defense, up to 14% when she reaches 2000 defense. Her overworld passive is actually really unique and handy. When Linnea is not in combat, her aimed shot charge time will greatly decrease to be pretty much instant, similar to C6 Tainari or Setos. When shooting these shots at an animal in the overworld, the arrow will transform into a net, like the ones you can buy from the Inazuma pet shop to catch animals and place them in your teapot, which is really cool, but you can only catch a limited amount of animals like that every week. Also, when shooting these shots at an ore in the overworld, it will mark it to then summon Lumi to deal an AoE hit to break the ores around the marked one, and also collect all the drops, which is such an amazing quality of life feature when farming ores in the overworld, similar to Nahida's ability with collecting plants. Unlike the net ability, this one isn't limited, but after a few rapid shots it will have a cooldown, and it will do 20% less damage against enemies, so you can't really take advantage of it for combat. For talent priority, you want to focus primarily on her skill, as it's doing all of her damage, and then level her burst for better healing. Her normal and charged attacks can be completely ignored. For rotations, if you have Columbina or Furina on the team, you would want to start with them to get Columbina's great Luna buffs and Furina's fanfares from Linnea's team-wide healing, then switch to Linnea. For most rotations, use her skill tap to summon Lumi in her superpower form to do consistent off-field Lunar Crystallize damage. But if the enemy is about to die or enter a shielded state and you want to deal as much damage as possible in this short time, then continuously keep tapping the skill to get Lumi into her ultimate power form to deal her big Lunar Crystallize nuke. Then you can use her burst for its healing. But the fact that it also summons Lumi gives you the option to skip the skill cast and just use the burst when swapping to Linnea to save rotation time. Also, because the burst doesn't do any damage and her defense build making her very tanky, then if you don't need the healing, you can choose to use it every other rotation to save on rotation time and focus on offensive stats instead of energy. Unless you play Zibai with Harbinger of Dawn or with Furina, which in that case you would want to burst every rotation. Unfortunately, because the burst states that after recasting Lumi, her form won't change, it means we can't use the nuke first and then burst to change to the super power form, which would have let us use the two forms in one rotation and would have made her insanely powerful. Her signature weapon, Golden Frostbound Oath, is her best in slot. It gives low base attack and 88% crit damage, which she appreciates as a defense scaling character. The effect increases her defense by 16%. Also, when the wielder deals damage with their skill, Geo and Lunar Crystallize damage is increased by 40%. And if there are moon drifts on the field, the whole team will gain a Geo and Lunar Crystallize damage increase of 20%. As a general weapon for other characters, unfortunately only Linnea and Goro can really use it. But for Linnea specifically, it's a great weapon when you compare it to the next option, given there are not really other great bow options that give defense in both their main stat or effects, as well as the fact that Linnea doesn't really care about anything other than crit defense and EM buffs, which really reduces her options. Still, any offensive crit bow you have, especially ones that give an additional crit buff in their effect, can be a great stat stick for her. She doesn't really care about energy, but you can use Elegy for the end for its EM buff to herself and the team. For free to play, her best option seems to be the 3-star slingshot. Because Linnea only cares about the crit in most weapons, the amount of crit rate the slingshot gives is competitive and even surpass some 5 stars, making it an amazing option. You can also use the other 3-star crit damage weapons, which are also very competitive for the same reason. You can also look at bows like the craftable Notcry bow and Cloudforged, which give a ton of EM, but given how crit is a much better stat for her and how easy it is to get the 3-star weapons, I would recommend you to stick with the crit weapons. Her best artifact set is the 4-piece Obad of Morningstar and Moon, which gives 80 elemental mastery and up to 60% lunar reaction damage, which is amazing for her given how strong her Lunar Crystallize damage is. But the 4-piece Husk of Opulent Dreams is very similar in damage given how much defense it gives, and can even surpass Morningstar with higher constellations, as they do appear to raise the value of her defense scaling, making it much more impactful to her overall damage. You can also use Silken Moon's Serenade, but it's usually better to place it on someone else like Ilua, Aino, or even Columbina. For the main stats, go with defense on both the Sands and Goblet, and for the Circlet, use either crit damage or crit rate. If you are going for Slingshot or other crit rate weapons, notice that you also get 19% crit rate from her Ascension, and another 5% from Iluga, which at C6 is enhanced to 10%. That's 55 to 60% crit rate right off the bat, so you might want to go for a crit damage Circlet at that point. Another thing to point out is that you don't really want to build energy on her, as she is very tanky, and using her burst every other rotation can be enough. But if you do need the healing every rotation when using Harbinger of Dawn or Furina, then around 150 ER or even less should be enough, given you will usually run her with 2 or even 3 Geo characters, which will give a ton of energy anyway. For substats, focus on crit rate and crit damage, then defense percent and flat defense, reaching 2000 defense to max her Luna passive buff, as well as her EM buff. Then elemental mastery is great, and some ER can also be nice. When it comes to her best synergies and teams, she will work best with Zibai as her dedicated support, similar to the other Notcry pairings we got this region. Until now, Zibai's best team was with Columbina, Ilua, and Goro, which at C4 also provided healing. I believed Linnea was a direct replacement for him, given all the others are pretty much considered dedicated Lunar Crystallize supports that just came out for this reaction. And Goro, being a healer like Linnea, but not really designed for the Lunar Crystallize reaction, seemed like the most replaceable member of the team and also the oldest one. It was a no-brainer that he was the odd one out to be replaced, but apparently from the calcs we got, this is very situational. If you have Ilua at at C6, then yes, Goro is the one to replace. But if not, which given how new Ilua is, and how hard it is to get a C6 character in one patch, that probably almost no one has and won't have for a while, in that case Goro is actually the better choice for that team, which feels very wrong in many ways given Ilua is literally a dedicated support for Zibai and just came out, yet someone like Goro can actually be better. Anyways, once you do have Ilua at C6, Linnea elevates the team's damage significantly, which is also quite absurd given how strong Zibai already was, reaching around 145,000 team DPS, which was the third best DPS team in the game, to now appearing to reach around 160 to 170,000 team DPS, which is just insane and makes her instantly the best DPS in the game by a fair bit, even if you play Mavuika's new hard combos. And with that, breaking the game balance even more, like it wasn't already too broken with everything we got in Notcry. Hoyo really going all out. But even if you don't run this complete premium team, as it is one of the more expensive teams in the game right now, needing 3 new 5 stars and 1 C6 4 star, given how strong the team is, even if you just place 2 Hydro Sub-DPS or buffers in the other slots, the team's damage should still stay very high. That said, the next best option if you don't have Ilua and Goro is Furina, who is a great match with her given Linnea's team-wide healing, pretty much being a direct replacement for Shilonen, as even though Shilonen gives a bit more buffing, Linnea compensates for it by doing amazing personal damage. Also, she is not restricted to having 2 Hydro characters on the team, and her team-wide healing generates Furina's fanfare much better for the team, which Zibai can appreciate, as unlike the other Lunar carries, Zibai can benefit from a bit of damage percent for her regular Geo damage. It's less impactful for characters like Zibai since she doesn't care much about damage percent, but for any other Geo carry we got over the years, she is pretty much the best Shilonen replacement and best support in general. The Lunar Crystallize reaction elevates the old Geo team so much that you will always want to run them in it, and Linnea is hands down the best support for that, making her pretty much the best Geo support in the game. Pairing Linnea with Columbina, similar to how it is with Inefa, can create a very powerful core, giving her great damage and healing for the team, even for someone that is not a Geo carry like New Villette, who yet again gets another great team with every new support that comes out. Linnea can also be placed with the other Notcry supports to create the ultimate Lunar reaction team with Columbina as the main DPS, which I think is a really cool team that I can't wait to try out. And given her damage and healing along with her EM buff, you can even use her with the other Notcry carries as a great last slot sustain. When it comes to weaknesses, compared to the other Notcry dedicated supports, I believe her value is the lowest for a few reasons. For starters, even though she's a nice alternative last slot with the other Notcry carries, she really only works in one type of team. Unlike Inefa, who has the option to be mixed into other teams like Overvape and Hyperbloom thanks to the properties of the Electro and Hydro elements to exist on the enemy at the same time, or Lauma, who is the best option for Bloom, Hyperbloom and Burgeon, even Escoffier, which is more restrictive with her kit, is one of the best options for Melt. Linnea, however, is not really meant to work outside of Lunar Crystallize, so she very much lacks versatility. I also think Zibai would have appreciated her much more if she was a shielder. Zibai is the only DPS from this region who actually really cares about being interrupted, since her kit is designed around completing her normal attack string and hitting the 4th hit for the big Lunar Crystallize damage, which if she gets interrupted you lose. Yes, Goro does give interruption resistance, but as you can see it's just not enough. She is also very tanky given how much defense the team has, which already reduced the need for a healer, and yet she's getting a team healer. I think they really wanted her to work with Furina, so she can also elevate the older Geo carries, which is nice, but given she is Zibai's dedicated support, and her team is pretty much closed now with all new dedicated characters, I'm surprised they didn't go for even one shielder. Another thing is the fact that Zibai is the only one of the Notcry carries who already got a dedicated support with Ilua, which directly reduces the need to get Linnea compared to the other carries and their alternatives. And lastly, she is Geo, which as I went over in the past doesn't really have many enemies to counter like the rest of the more common elements. For example, Inefa already got 3 different enemies just since Notcry came out that are extra weak to Lunar Charge or Electro Charge in general. So no matter how overpowered Zibai's new team is with her, it's not helping much if you can't meet the enemy's requirements, which together with her low versatility and the fact that Iluga exists, really hurts her value, at least compared to the other Lunar supports. That said, she is still insanely good, and the amount of damage she dishes out with Zibai is insane and can deal with most enemies. I'm not saying she's bad, cause she is really an amazing support, but I needed to put it out there as everybody seems to go nuts because they saw her numbers with Zibai. Now Now let's quickly break down her constellations to see if they are worth investing in compared to her signature. C1 gives the party up to 18 stacks, similar to Shenhe quills, that buff Lunar Crystallize damage by 75% of Linnea's defense when Linnea activates her elemental skill or when the moon drifts on the field unleash their attack. If she uses her ultimate power form nuke, she can only consume 5 stacks, but gets a bigger damage buff of 150% of her defense. C2 gives the Hydra and Geo characters on the team 40 crit damage when the moon drifts on the field deal damage. If Linnea uses the ultimate power form nuke, then it will receive an additional 150 crit damage. Also, if the team is in Ascendant Gleam when Lumi deals Lunar Crystallize damage, as well as moon drifts on the field, a moon drift attack will be unleashed that counts all Hydra and Geo characters to contribute in the hit calculation. C3 gives extra skill levels, which is a very nice damage boost. C4 gives a 25% defense buff to Linnea and the active character for 5 seconds when the moon drifts on the field trigger an attack. If Linnea is on the field, she gets both buffs for a 50% defense increase. C5 raises her burst levels, which is just more healing, and C6 enhances her C1 stacks to get the maximum amount immediately, as well as buff their damage to 175% of Linnea's defense. It also elevates the team's Lunar Crystallize damage by 25%, which is really nice. She is already amazing at C0, but if you plan to invest, her C1 is looking not that impressive, where her signature weapon is actually great since there are not really any amazing alternatives. But if you want to go further, her C2 is a great one and better than her signature. Linnea is an incredible support for Zibai, even though she don't really need her given how strong she already is, as well as how disproportionately strong she makes Zibai now, breaking the game balance completely and showing that Genshin is not slowing down with the power creep, which says a lot about the value and longevity of the Notcry carries, that by Snezhnaya will probably be close to the current position of the Natlan carries. She does have her weaknesses, and I really do think that if she was a shielder, the Zibai team would have been perfectly synergistic, but we will just have to deal with it as I don't think Zibai is gonna get any new supports in the near future. Because of my issues with her, I'm still not sure if I would have given her a spot on my top 5 support list, even if her Zibai team is the strongest in the game, as versatility and overall value play a very big role here. So if you are not invested in Lunar Crystallize teams, I don't think you really need her. But all that said, I do think she is an incredible support. And if you are invested in this reaction or even have all the Geo carries you want to bring back to life, and especially if you have Zibai, she's probably going to be the best pull for that team, elevating it dramatically, and I do think that in that case you should go for her. And that's a wrap. If this video helped you in any way, consider giving it a like and subscribe for more Field Guides. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!